Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.
Welcome back to Thursday's Off the Ball. John Giles coming up a little bit later at 9 o'clock on the football show. Right now though, Ronan O'Gara is on the line. Good evening, Ronan.
Hey, Nathan, how are you?
I'm not too bad. This is a treat of a Thursday evening.
Yeah, different, alright. I forgot that there was a night option available. I'm usually focused in on the morning schedule, but nice to mix it up a bit.
No pressure. This is usually the John Giles slot, so we expect greatness.
Johnny Giles, yeah, love it. Yeah.
Are you of an evening? Can you relax in the evening? Are you constantly thinking rugby? Are you trying to sneak in a little bit more work in the evenings once the kids are in bed, or how do you?
Thursday evening we play Sunday, Saturday this week. So we got home at 6:30 Monday morning from a bus trip after a defeat to Toulouse. So Monday was a little bit of a haze. Tuesday was in for a little bit of a review walkthrough of how we should be better the next day. Wednesday was off. Today, I'd like to say it was training, but I'm not too sure. Looking at the video, it was training. It was an assembly of people on a rugby pitch where we didn't achieve what we wanted to achieve out of the session, but we've always, I suppose, prided ourselves on playing at the weekend. Many a team and many a player I have played with have been brilliant Monday to Friday, yet have not been at the races on a Saturday. So it's the Tarzan Jane syndrome, where you want to train like Jane and play like Tarzan. So the more of them you have, the better shape we're in. So yeah, today was poor, but we got a chance to fine tune tomorrow and hopefully be better Saturday night.
Roughly, how often do you come away from a session fully satisfied and go, yeah, you know what, we got everything we wanted out of that, in terms of the physical side of it, but also in terms of players taking on the messages?
Yeah, it's a good question. I just sometimes you feel like you're raging against the world, and I have to ask myself, why am I suppose, at loggerheads with a certain amount of players? And that seems to be particularly apt at the minute in my headspace. So I don't sit easily with that. It doesn't really suit me that much. But I suppose the one thing as a head coach, you need to be strong on his standards, and you need to keep driving that, and you're responsible for that. And that's where the assistants can't really do much about, because essentially they're good cop, I'm bad cop, and that's the way I like it really to be. But it's amazing, I suppose, then when you look at the video, the perception from their live reality, and I suppose when you settle down a little bit, you're able to see through the fog a little bit and dissect good bits to keep, and obviously the bits that we need to be much better at.
Can you sympathise with the players on a day like that, when, like, I always think back when I look at managers now. I was at City Liverpool last year, and in the press conference afterwards, watching Guardiola and Klopp, and just how drained they seemed to be. And it was around, it might have been April, and they were both playing Champions League quarterfinals like 2-3 days later, and you're thinking, like, they're going home that Sunday night shattered, probably sit and watch the game, into training Monday, they're flying to Spain to play this huge match on Tuesday morning, play it Wednesday night, back Saturday. Like, it's grueling, it's exhausting, and you're not playing twice a week, but you're playing Sunday, Saturday. Like, to somehow keep your spirits up and mentally to be sharp when you're going in, when you're probably a little bit wrecked.
Yeah, but I suppose that's what separates good from very good, being able to understand what your energy is needed for. I suffered, I think, a lot of that in the early days, where I did an awful lot of video analysis and probably took out my frustrations on players because they didn't watch enough tape that I felt they should have watched. But when you actually reflect on that, they're players. Some of them think they're artists, some of them think they're geniuses, some of them think they're very good hard workers, and each of them see the game differently, and each of their, I suppose, requirements are very different to have them firing for a Saturday. So that's when you, I suppose, become the leader, you become very aware of that some percentage of your group have contract issues, other guys have selection issues, other guys have personal problems, Other guys have form problems. Other guys have issues with concentration, focus. So it's very, I suppose, different in terms of the dilemmas you're facing. But when you have 20 odd staff and 40 odd playing, it's a lot at you. But I'm making this out to be negative, but it's not negative at all. It just it can sap you, but you got to make sure that you're, I suppose, refilling those juices to make sure you're coming in the right mindset the following day.
We had Stuart Lancaster in studio on Tuesday, a really interesting piece, talking to Joe and starting to explain his reasons behind going to Racing next summer. I'm wondering, I know you didn't coach in the Irish system, but you obviously know it very well. How big a shock to the system it might be, the difference in terms of setups and expectations, and not having as much control over the players, or having to play more matches, all the players to play more matches. Do you feel coaching in France is very different experience to coaching back in Ireland?
Yeah, I would think it is. It's a fantastic championship, and I'm obviously biased because I'm in it. I probably believe in it. I probably see it for the absolute beauty that's involved in it. It's an absolute dog of a competition where you're challenged every week. Your challenges are very, very different. But the top 14 is an absolute monster, and it challenges, I suppose, every facet of your makeup, essentially, be it physically, mentally, and it's a brilliant competition, and one where, the standard may not be at the highest all year round, but can it be for 10 years? It's about nearly survival of the fittest, but also then when it gets to the phase finale or the quarter-final on of the league, you have to be of a really, really good standard, because the quality of the player in France is quite exceptional. Also, I suppose, throw in relegation, and it puts a very, very different emphasis on what is required and how the game is played. The Stuart Lancaster's interview with Joe was brilliant listening, brilliant radio. A lot of good nuggets in it. But like anything, I think you need to come here, live here, taste it, and then be able to give an opinion on it, because it's very, very different to the URC. Very, very different in the fact that in a lot of those situations, a lot of it is geared to priority national team in France and in England. The national team goes on, but also the domestic league is of huge importance.
And we see that this weekend, where Munster are playing Ulster, and obviously Munster have a bit of an injury crisis, but they've also got another 8 players unavailable because they're going to be on Ireland duty, and it's an interprovincial derby. It's a massive game. Just the 2 wins so far for Munster in the URC. A lot of frustration among Munster supporters as to how the season started and the fitness levels, and maybe an expectation that there was going to be an overnight transformation of style of play, and they're maybe stuck between the two at the moment. What's been your sense of what you've seen of Munster so far this season?
I'd missed the game at the weekend, but prior to that, I'd seen a few snippets, and it's mixed at best. But I would have, I think, huge confidence in the coaching group that they have. It doesn't happen overnight, there's no doubt about that. The style beforehand was quite a dated style in terms of, I suppose, kick and contest. I know from speaking to Mike Prendergast that wouldn't be his style of playing. But it depends on, habits and behaviours of players. It takes a little bit of time to change that, because it's all well and good repping this in training, but it actually comes to the heat of battle when your heart rate is going whatever, 180 beats per minute or 200. You resort to type. The type is that they probably played a game where they didn't probably feel that they have the license to express themselves. Now that seems changed. I probably know the composition of Dennis Leamy and what he stands for and what he believes in, and I would be very confident in him having a huge impact on that group, because he's someone who probably had a big impact on me as a player and as a leader, and I think that's exactly what Munster need now. They need to, I suppose, accept the reality of where their game is and how they need to get into a position where they can challenge. And Dennis, for me, made the most appropriate comment of the season so far, in the fact that they probably have to forget talking about silverware for a while and earn the right to talk about silverware, because the team are more interested in I suppose, showing acts to each other as opposed to talking about acts.
Leamy, it was seen as a real coup for Munster to be able to bring him back home from Leinster. As a personality, he's probably slightly lower profile than some of the huge names of that great Munster era. When you talk about his personality and what he brings to a dressing room, what is that?
Yeah, I think that probably perception. I don't think within the dressing room he would be perceived as a lower name. I think within the inner hub he'd be very, very respected and very, very well thought of, and would have a huge kudos. So with the guys, certainly when I played there, Dennis would have been, you mean, at the senior players table, and would have been very respected. So I don't think they come any bigger than him in that regard. But I think he had his, I suppose he dipped his toe in a club level, getting a feel for what's involved in coaching, and then he kind of liked the idea of what it entailed, and then he made the brave move to move to Leinster, and then he got to see the inner circle and the standards that they have set, and become obviously the elite team in Ireland by a distance, and now he'll be able to kind of, I suppose, mix what he's seen there with also the fact that mix that with his views on how he can get the best out of Munster. I think it will become a very, very interesting potion. But as you know, it doesn't really happen that quickly, especially when you come up against, a Johnny Sexton, Henshaw, Ringrose midfield. That's quite difficult to impose on.
Well, we Shane Daly on recently, and he was talking about the change in styles for someone like him in the back three, where, as you say, it was kick chase, and that was what was expected of him. Whereas now suddenly he's getting his hands on the ball a lot more. He's expected to be more creative. He's expected to add something to that back line. And like, for players who've been in that system for 3 or 4 years, we're probably expecting too much to expect in 3 or 4 games that they'll suddenly get everything that the new coaching team wants.
Yeah, and I suppose the big thing too is, Nathan, is like how engaged are players and how is their capacity to make decisions under pressure. There's always this big emphasis on the style of the coaching, but like, what you don't want as a coach is you don't want your players to be robotic and looking for orders from you every time, because otherwise they're not in a position to make decisions under pressure. So you're really trying to set up your players, and I know Mike Prendergast would be very big on this, and the fact that you probably empower them with what potentially could happen, and then they were able to pull the trigger on 3 potential solutions during a game. But like, for that to happen, you have to rep this in training with different combinations against rush defence, against wet ball, against a howling wind, different scenarios like that. And it won't come straight away. But I think what was probably interesting from the little clippets I saw at the weekend was just, the capacity near the line for Conor Murray to pick out a good pass behind the back. Prior to that, it might have been Munster front door pass against a brick wall and play another phase, but it was just a little subtle shift by you playing behind it with a little bit of decoy and a lovely pass, a floated pass for 15 metres, and Liam Coombs goes in unopposed. We haven't seen that many tries like that from, I suppose, Munster in big games.
Just briefly on Ireland then, South Africa coming to town on Saturday week. I think we're probably past the Johnny Sexton conversation, that everyone is fully on board that if he's fit, he will be starting number 10 in a year's time at the World Cup. Behind him, the emergence of Kieran Frawley and now Jack Crowley as well, and maybe his ability to put some pressure on Joey Carberry at Munster. Carberry's fully fit as well. We've got an A international against the All Blacks the night before that South Africa game. What are your thoughts on Frawley and Crowley, and what Andy Farrell and the provincial coaches can get out of them over the next year, and how quickly they can progress over the next year?
Yeah, and that's it's a fascinating question and a fascinating subject in the fact that Johnny is by far the superior totem in that position by a long way. But with the, I suppose, triangle of Carberry, Frawley, Crowley, it becomes very, very interesting in the fact that it's nothing to do with a player issue. What you need to be looking at here is the fact that 7 minutes into a test game, Johnny Sexton goes down, unfortunately, with an injury. You have a triangle potentially of Carberry, Frawley, Crowley to manage a game for 73 minutes, because if Johnny goes down, you don't have Crawley or Crowley together, Frawley or Crowley together, or Carberry or Crowley together. You have Johnny and one other, so the onus is on, essentially, you've 10 backs to play 80 minutes, 7 start and 3 come off the bench, potentially. So you have your starter and someone to come in. So I think that's what the next 12 months is essentially intriguing for, in that who will take that role, and how will they take that role, and what role will they I suppose be given, because I talk about the Examiner tomorrow in the fact that the November internationals, is it winning the 3 games to be on and end all, or is actually how are we in better shape to be better for the next World Cup than we have been in previous campaigns? Because insanity, the definition of insanity is doing the exact same things over and over again and expecting a different result. So I use that in my coaching a lot, and I try to say it in French to boys, and they're looking at me going, what is this guy on about? So from Ireland's point of view, who they find out in the November and 6 Nations to be able to, because if you're looking at silverware, you need 2 in each position. I don't think we have 2 at the minute, because Joey has unfortunately been injured, but for me, he definitely has the goods to be a top class 10.
So you think against Australia he needs to start one of the others to get that learning?
I would say yes, because depending on what team South Africa play, is it going to be it will be a cracking test match if South Africa go full strength and Ireland go full strength. If that's the case, then that's a game, obviously, that's incredibly interesting. Fiji, I think, is different because, I don't think they're a threat to us result-wise, performance-wise, because they've some fantastic players, and we learn a lot about certain players, but the big games are obviously South Africa and Australia. But I think it's important with Plan B, you need to see who can manage a game, and who is your going to second 10 going to be.
Ronan, great stuff as always.
Thank you, Nathan. Cheers. That flew.
Right. That's us done. You're done. Go. Ronan O'Gara there. All our rugby and off the ball is with Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.
Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.